My name is Kitty Bowl, and I never saw it coming. Not in 1,000 lifetimes. The home I had built, the sacrifices I had made, the love I had poured into my family, all of it meant nothing in the end. When my son and his wife pushed me into the basement, it was more than just physical displacement. It was a quiet, calculated erasure of my place in their lives. The betrayal was so smooth, so practiced, I almost convinced myself it was normal, but it wasn't. It was the first warning sign that everything I thought I knew was about to shatter, but love wasn't enough. One evening my son sat me down, his voice carefully measured, his words deliberate. "Mum, we need more space." His wife sat beside him, nodding along, eyes full of polite dismissal. "The basement is cozy," she added, as if she were doing me a favour. And just like that, the walls of my home closed in around me. No ceremony, no gratitude, just exile. I spent months watching them from the shadows, their laughter echoing through the rooms I once ruled, their lives unfolding as if I were nothing more than a forgotten relic tucked away beneath the floorboards. Then, one afternoon, my son knocked on the basement door, his voice syrupy with expectation. "Mum, we could use some help with the mortgage. It's just temporary, of course." Temporary, like my presence in their lives, like their respect for me, like the illusion that this house still belonged to me. That was the moment everything shifted. No more blind obedience, no more quiet suffering. This story was getting a rewrite, and the first page, a for sale sign planted right in the front yard. Call to action, drop your city below. We want to see how far this story has reached. The day I found myself arranging photo frames on a concrete wall, I knew something had gone terribly wrong with my life. The basement wasn't cold. Tom and Becky had installed heating when they moved in, but the warmth didn't reach me, because no matter how many upgrades they made, no matter how much paint they slathered on the walls, it was still a basement. I stood in silence, staring at 40 years of memories, now confined to a space meant for storage and laundry. Photographs of my honeymoon with Robert, Tom's college graduation, smiling faces locked behind glass, while I was locked beneath the life I had built. It hit me then. I had become just another item they tucked away, and if I didn't do something soon, I would disappear completely. "Mum, you shouldn't be alone in this big house." Tom said it casually, like he was stating a fact, like it was inevitable. He sat at the kitchen island, swirling the last sip of coffee in his mug, watching as I prepared the same Sunday roast I had made for decades. I stiffened, pretending to focus on the oven temperature. "I'm perfectly fine, Tom." He ignored that. "All these stairs can't be good for you." I bit back my irritation, keeping my voice steady. A little arthritis doesn't make me an invalid. But Tom persisted, week after week. And then, one Sunday evening, Becky spoke up from the living room. Too casual, too rehearsed. "We're actually thinking of moving." One Robert had insisted I keep private. "Some things should stay between us, Ellie," he had whispered in his final weeks. "You never know when you might need something that's just yours." And now, standing in my own kitchen, listening to my son discuss my house as though it were already his, I realized Robert had been right. They arrived with moving trucks 3 weeks later. I stood on my own front porch, frozen, watching strangers carry furniture I didn't recognize into my home. "You're moving in here?" Tom grinned, his arm wrapping around my shoulders like he had gifted me something precious. "It's perfect, Mum. You get to keep your home, but you won't be alone anymore." Becky beamed. "We've renovated the basement. It's like a little apartment now, your own bathroom, a kitchenette, everything." Everything. Everything except my dignity, apparently. That night I lay awake, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of my own house. Footsteps, furniture scraping against floors that had once been mine. The murmur of voices above me, drifting through the thin new walls. Somewhere in the house, my house, someone was sleeping in my bed. And I was downstairs, in the dark, waiting. Kitty Bowl was done waiting. I hadn't been out much since the move. The town felt smaller now, suffocating, like the walls of the basement had stretched beyond my home and swallowed the world outside. By the time I arrived at the library, my knees ached, but the moment I stepped inside, I felt something shift. This place had always been a sanctuary. As a teacher, I had watched young faces light up as librarians performed voices for each character, making stories come alive. Now, I settled into a chair by the window, letting the warm sunlight spill over my face, like it was reminding me I was still here, still living, still capable of changing the story. "Kitty," I blinked, looking up. Marcus Wilson, the owner of the small bookstore where I had bought classroom supplies for years. He stood there carrying a stack of books, his smile broad and familiar. "I haven't seen you in ages," he said, setting his books down beside me. "How have you been since Robert passed? I've missed your recommendations. You always knew which mysteries were worth reading." Something about his genuine interest brought a lump to my throat. When was the last time someone had asked about me, rather than what I could do for them? I hesitated. Then, finally, the truth slipped out before I could stop it. "I'm managing," I said. "Though things have changed recently. My son and his family moved in with me." I hesitated again. Then came the words I hadn't planned to say, words that had been suffocating me in silence. "Well, not exactly with me. They're upstairs. I'm in the basement now." Marcus's smile faded. "They moved you to the basement of your own home?" Hearing it out loud, from someone else, felt worse. It felt real. I rushed to defend them, an instinct I had relied on too long. "It's been renovated," I said quickly. "It has its own bathroom and everything." Marcus just watched me, his eyes careful, steady. Then gently he said, "That's not right, Kitty. Robert wouldn't have wanted that for you." No, he wouldn't have. And suddenly I couldn't pretend anymore. I exhaled, barely above a whisper. "They're waiting for me to die." The words hung in the air, heavy and unforgiving. Marcus sat with me as I talked, really talked, for the first time in months. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer meaningless comfort. He just listened. And when I was done, when I had emptied myself, he said something that changed everything. "Is it still your home?" I opened my mouth, then shut it, because deep down I knew the answer. That night, when I returned, Tom was waiting at the door, arms crossed, his face tight with frustration. "Where have you been?" His voice wasn't concerned. It was accusatory. "We were worried. You didn't answer your phone." I blinked, realizing it had been in my purse all day, silence from my time at the library. I brushed past him toward the basement door. "I went for a walk." Tom stepped in my path. "Mum, you can't just disappear like that. What if something had happened to you?" There it was. The illusion of care stitched tightly over his real concern, not for me, but for his own convenience. Once, his words might have touched me. Now, they felt like chains. I stared him dead in the eye. "I'm fine, Tom. I'm not an invalid, remember?" He hesitated, caught off guard, then backpedaling. "Of course not, but at your age." I cut him off. "I'm 68, not 98. Your father was still running marathons at my age." Silence. Real, uncomfortable silence. Robert had always been our bridge, the man who translated our differences, who helped Tom see me as more than just his mother, more than just an obligation. Without Robert, that bridge had collapsed. And suddenly, I knew it would never be rebuilt. I was done waiting for Tom to see me, because for the first time, I was seeing myself. Kitty Bowl isn't just realizing the truth. She's preparing to act on it. The next step? Selling the house right out from under them. I stood at the doorway, staring at my son's beautifully curated life, a life that had grown comfortable, expansive, and entirely separate from me, despite being built on my sacrifices. Their laughter drifted down from the living room, casual, effortless, as Becky called out, "Tom, grab me a glass of wine, will you?" I listened to the clinking of glasses, the hum of a television, the muffled footsteps of my grandchildren running. Upstairs, their world untouched by the reality of what was happening beneath their feet. I swallowed hard, gripping the phone in my hands. Janet had promised the offer would come today. The Chens wanted my home, and they weren't dragging their feet. My pulse thrummed as I scanned the basement, the place where I had been gently pushed aside, shuffled out of sight like an old piece of furniture no longer needed, but not quite ready to be thrown away. But now I was the one making the decisions. I inhaled deeply, steadying myself before I climbed the stairs. Tom was sprawled across the couch when I entered, one arm slung over the backrest, remote in hand, barely glancing up as I walked in. "Hey, Mum, lasagna was great." Becky looked up from her laptop, flashing a brief smile before returning to her screen. "Yeah, thanks for handling that. The Johnsons loved it." Loved it. The smallest acknowledgement, as if I were a hired cook, as if my presence here was purely functional. I pressed my lips together, my grip tightening on the phone in my hand. Not anymore. I cleared my throat. "I need to talk to you both." Becky barely looked up, scrolling through emails. "Now?" "Yes, now." Something in my tone made Tom straighten. "What's going on?" I exhaled slowly, steadying myself. "I've sold the house." The words landed like a grenade in the center of the room. Becky froze mid-scroll, blinking up at me. Tom's relaxed posture vanished in an instant, his brow furrowing. "What?" I kept my voice calm, my posture firm. "The house is sold. The buyers signed today." Silence. Then, "Mom, that's ridiculous." Tom stood, eyes flashing with something between disbelief and anger. "You can't just sell the house. We live here." I held my ground. "Correction. I own the house, and now I've sold it." Becky let out a sharp breath, finally setting her laptop aside. "To who?" "The Chens, lovely couple." "Doctors!" The colour drained from Tom's face. "You did this behind our backs." I met his gaze without flinching. "Would you have let me do it any other way?" Tom opened his mouth, then shut it. He knew the answer. The realization hit hard. Becky ran a hand through her hair, eyes darting toward Tom. "Okay, let's slow down. We need to talk about this because this isn't fair." Fair. That word twisted something deep inside me. I let out a cold, humourless laugh, shaking my head. "Fair?" I took a slow step forward, watching them both. "You took my home. You pushed me into the basement. You treated me like an afterthought. Now I'm making decisions for myself and suddenly it's unfair." Becky flushed, but Tom wasn't backing down. "You should have come to us first. We would have figured something out." "Would you?" I challenged, eyes narrowing. "Would you have actually listened? Or would you have smiled, nodded, and convinced me I was being irrational, that I was old and confused, that I should think about what's best for the family?" Tom ran a hand over his face, exhaling sharply. Becky folded her arms, her voice tightly controlled. "So what happens now?" I smiled. "Now? You have 30 days to move out. Kitty Bowl isn't asking for permission anymore. She's taking back what's hers. The final act. It's going to change everything." I swirled the wine in my glass, watching the dim glow of the restaurant reflect against the deep red liquid. Helen's words settled into me, heavy and undeniable. Robert would never have allowed this. I knew it. I had known it all along. But hearing it from someone else, someone who had seen me in my prime, before I had become the woman waiting in the basement, it changed everything. Helen squeezed my hand once more before pulling back. "So, what's next?" I exhaled slowly, setting my glass down. "I tell them, soon." Helen arched an eyebrow. "How soon?" I hesitated, then met her gaze. "Tomorrow morning." Her grin spread slow and wicked. "Now that, Kitty, is a moment I wish I could witness." The next morning, I stood in the kitchen, waiting. I had barely slept, running over a dozen variations of how this confrontation might unfold. Anger, shock, bargaining. Would Tom argue? Would Becky twist the narrative to make it seem like I was abandoning them? No more waiting, no more hesitation. Tom shuffled into the kitchen first, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Becky followed soon after, tightening the belt on her robe, looking like she had already braced for another day of managing the house I still owned. Noah's laughter echoed from the upstairs hallway. Lily's small feet thudded against the wooden floors. A family living their life, shaping their future, still believing this house belonged to them. I cleared my throat. "I need to talk to both of you." Becky barely glanced at me, already pulling eggs from the fridge. "Can it wait? Lily needs to be at practice by 9. "No." Something in my voice made her pause. Tom frowned, looking up. "Mum, what's going on?" I stood taller, gripping the edge of the counter. I'm selling the house. The words hung in the air like a bomb without a countdown. Becky froze mid-motion, holding an egg over the pan, like she had suddenly forgotten what she was doing. Tom's entire posture stiffened, his hand tightening on the coffee mug. Excuse me? I didn't flinch. I've already accepted the offer. The buyers want to close in 30 days. Becky turned slowly, eyes narrowing. You're joking. I'm not. Tom set down his coffee mug with deliberate force. You can't just... Mum, you can't just throw us out. I let out a soft laugh, shaking my head. Throw you out! I stepped forward, lowering my voice just enough that it hit sharp and cutting. You moved me into the basement. You erased me from my own house. You made plans for my property, my future, without even asking me. And now that I'm reclaiming it, suddenly it's unfair. Becky opened her mouth, but no words came out. Tom ran a hand over his face, exhaling sharply. We thought... You never complained. We assumed... You assumed wrong. Silence. Thick. Unforgiving. Lily peeked into the kitchen, sensing the tension. Tom glanced at her, then back at me, anger simmering beneath his confusion. So what happens now? I smiled, slow and steady. Now, you have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. I levelled my gaze at Becky, the weight of years pressing down on me, sharpening the edges of my voice. Explain it? I repeated, setting down my fork with deliberate precision. She nodded, blinking away the moisture gathering in her eyes. Tom still stood, pacing like a caged animal, running his hands through his hair in a way that mirrored Robert's so much it stung. Oh, we just need to understand why you're doing this. I exhaled slowly, planting my hands against the table, because I finally remembered that this is my life, my home, and my decision. Tom stopped pacing, turning to face me fully. We thought we were helping you. I let out a sharp laugh, shaking my head. Helping me? Helping me by taking over my house? By pushing me into the basement like some relic you weren't ready to throw away but didn't want cluttering up your space. His jaw tightened. Becky's fingers clutched her napkin, knuckles whitening. That's not fair. I leaned forward slightly, steady, controlled. Fair? Fair was letting me believe this would be a home we all shared. Fair was not treating me like a servant you assume is available for childcare, cooking and errands whenever you need. Fair was remembering that I built this life before you walked into it. Silence, the kind that stretches, suffocating the room with unspoken truths. Then, this house was supposed to stay in the family, Mum. Tom's voice was lower now, tinged with something almost raw. It's meant to be ours someday. Ours and the kids. I straightened, folding my hands in my lap. Someday, not now, not when I'm still alive, not when I'm still perfectly capable of deciding what happens next. His nostrils flared, his fists clenching at his sides. You sound like you're making some impulsive decision out of spite. That was when I laughed again. Soft, knowing. Spite? No, Tom. This is survival. Becky inhaled sharply, looking away. I kept going, because this was my moment. You made plans for my house, for my future. But you didn't ask me what I wanted. You assumed I was happy down there, that I wouldn't question it, that I wouldn't one day wake up and remember I deserved more. Tom shook his head as if trying to clear the words away. This isn't like you, Mum. I tilted my head slightly, watching him carefully. You keep saying that, like you know me better than I know myself. He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand, cutting him off. I've spent years putting everyone else first. Years being the dependable mother, the supportive grandmother, the woman who sacrifices quietly because that's what I thought I was supposed to do. But tell me something, Tom. When did I stop being a person in your eyes? When did I become just a piece of convenience in your life? His breath hitched. Becky wasn't looking at me anymore. I stood, slow, deliberate. I am selling this house. I am moving to Lakeshore Village. And in 3 weeks, you will have to find a new place to live. That is the reality. It's done. Tom shook his head, disbelief still warring with anger. We could fight this, you know, legally. I raised a brow. You could try, but I've already signed the contracts. This house is no longer yours to claim. Becky's shoulders sagged. Tom finally sat down, staring at the table, at nothing in particular, his world crashing into itself. They had believed this house was already theirs, but now, standing before them, was the woman they had underestimated, a woman they had assumed would quietly fade into the background, obedient, grateful, forgotten, a woman they never expected to fight back. Marcus arrived precisely at 9, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the cafe down the street. "Thought you could use something strong today," he said, handing me one. I smiled, taking it gratefully. "You were right," I admitted. "They're still in shock." Marcus leaned against the counter, studying me carefully. "And you? How are you holding up?" I stirred my coffee slowly. "I'm ready," I said, and for the first time I truly meant it. The day passed in a blur of packing, sorting, and silent decisions. Books into boxes, photo albums stacked carefully, Robert's favourite chair labelled for donation, each item a piece of my past, each choice a step toward my future. Marcus worked beside me without question, lifting boxes, taping cartons shut, keeping my mind centred when it started to wander toward doubt. When the movers arrived later that afternoon, I felt the final weight of this transition settle onto my shoulders. I was leaving, for real. As I watched them load the last of my belongings onto the truck, my phone vibrated. A message from Tom. "We're coming back tomorrow. We need to talk." I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed my reply. There's nothing left to talk about. I hit send, and just like that, the last piece of my hesitation vanished. The emptiness of the house pressed against me, thick and unfamiliar. No footsteps overhead, no children's laughter spilling from the hallway, no murmured conversations drifting from the living room. For the first time in decades, the house was completely mine, and in just a few hours, it wouldn't be anymore. I sat up slowly, rubbing the stiffness from my arms. The mattress beneath me was bare, stripped of its sheets, its comfort, just like the walls around me, which no longer held any of my pictures, my books, my life. It was strange how quickly it had all unravelled, how easily 40 years had been sorted into boxes, decisions made about what was worth keeping and what needed to be left behind. A whole life packed up into a moving truck, waiting to head towards something entirely new. I pulled on a sweater, moving through the house one final time. The banister Robert had refinished, the window seat where I had read bedtime stories, the kitchen counters where I had taught Tom how to bake cookies. I ran my fingers along each surface, memorising them, knowing I'd never touch them again. The grief hit me in waves, not regret, but finality. Tom and Becky's absence made it easier. No shouting, no bargaining, no accusations about what I was leaving behind. Just me. And the space that had once been my world. My phone buzzed. "Marcus." "I'm outside, ready to go?" I exhaled, letting the breath stretch into something steadier than I expected. "I'll be right out." I grabbed my last bag, the one holding Robert's letter, my mother's china, the only pieces of my past I still needed, and headed for the door. The mention of Noah and Lily sent a pang through my heart, a gentle ache reminding me that some ties couldn't be severed, even by distance or resentment. I hesitated for a brief moment, then softened. "I'd love to see them." Tom exhaled, the tension in his voice loosening just slightly. "They've been asking non-stop. Lily says she wants to help you decorate." A small smile tugged at my lips. "I think I could use a decorator." Tom let out a quiet chuckle, the first real moment of ease between us in weeks. "Maybe this weekend?" I took a slow breath, grounding myself in the moment. That sounds perfect. The air between us wasn't healed, but it was thawing, shifting into something uncertain but hopeful. As the call ended, I glanced around my condo, the space not just new but full of possibility. Lily's laughter would fill these rooms. Noah's wide-eyed curiosity would explore every corner. Tom would step through my door as a guest, not as someone who had assumed ownership over my life. I had left behind the home where I had been pushed aside, traded it for a place that belonged fully to me. But maybe, just maybe, I hadn't left my family behind. Maybe they were finally starting to see me. As I had learned to see myself again, I never expected this transition to feel so easy. Or maybe not easy. Maybe right was the better word. The more time I spent in Lakeshore Village, the more I realized I had never truly belonged in that house anymore. I belonged here, among people who were actively shaping their lives, not waiting for life to happen to them. You're smiling more. Marcus's voice broke into my thoughts as we strolled along the lakeshore path. I glanced at him, amused. Am I? Yes. He tilted his head slightly. You don't notice it? I considered that for a moment. Had I been smiling more? Had my steps become lighter, my laughter easier? Had I started feeling like myself again? The weeks continued unfolding in quiet rhythms of new routines, small discoveries, and unexpected moments of joy. Lily and Noah visited, their excitement over my new space infectious. Lily rearranged my throw pillows, declaring the sofa needed more colour. Noah inspected the garden plots, already planning where I should plant cucumbers. Tom was cautious at first, unsure of how to navigate this new dynamic. But I could see something shifting. Acceptance, however reluctant, replacing the frustration that had once clouded his expressions. This place suits you, Mum, he admitted over coffee one morning. I met his gaze, steady. Yes, it does. Each morning I woke early, stepping into the soft golden light of dawn. The garden smelled earthy and rich, the scent of wet soil mixing with the delicate fragrances of basil and rosemary. Tomato vines stretched taller, curling around their stakes. Marigolds burst into colour, unfurling their petals like tiny suns. Everything was growing, including me. As the days passed, I noticed subtle changes in my routine. I no longer hesitated before making plans. I no longer worried about taking up space. I no longer questioned whether I deserved to be happy. The rhythm of my days felt lighter, carried by the quiet joy of small discoveries, like the way the lake reflected the sky just after sunset, or how laughter echoed across the clubhouse during bridge nights. You seem different, Marcus observed one evening as we lingered on the dock. I smiled, watching the rippling water beneath our feet. I am different. He glanced at me, intrigued. How so? I turned slightly, taking in the quiet hum of crickets and the distant glow of porch lights across the water. For the first time, I feel like I'm living my life for me. Marcus didn't speak right away. Then, soft, knowing. That's a beautiful thing, Kitty. Marcus hesitated, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee mug, as if steadying himself for what he was about to say. And if I'm being honest, I'd like to be closer to you. The words hung in the air, quiet but undeniable. For the first time in a long time, I felt something stir in me. Not fear, not apprehension, but possibility. I swallowed, carefully setting my spoon down on the saucer. You'd move here? For me? He met my gaze, his expression steady, sincere. Not just for you. But you are a significant factor in my decision. The moment stretched between us, rich with implications and unsaid words. I inhaled slowly, choosing each word with precision. You know me well enough by now to understand that I value my independence. Marcus nodded, not defensive, just listening. I would never ask you to compromise that. I studied him carefully. Marcus wasn't trying to change my life. He was offering to be a part of it. That was different. That was something I could entertain. I allowed a small smile to tug at my lips. Then maybe it's worth considering. Marcus's confession had shifted something in me. The main attraction is being closer to you, Eleanor. We hadn't put labels on whatever was growing between us. Romance at our age was not about grand declarations, but about quiet certainty. I hadn't expected to want this. Hadn't anticipated feeling this much joy at simply knowing someone wanted to be near me. There's a unit available in Building D, I found myself saying, my voice softer than usual. Just across the courtyard, Marcus's eyes brightened. You've been paying attention. A blush crept into my cheeks. Maybe I've made some inquiries, just out of curiosity, of course. He chuckled. Of course. It was easy, this conversation, this tentative plan. Nothing rushed, nothing reckless, just two people choosing to be part of each other's lives in a way that felt natural. August arrived with its gentle warmth, bringing the full bounty of my garden, sweet tomatoes, fragrant basil, sun-coloured peppers, and fluttering butterflies dancing among the marigolds. It also brought Marcus to Lakeshore Village. I watched him settle into his new space with quiet delight, pleased by the casual intimacy his presence added to my days. Morning coffee on his balcony, evening walks without needing to schedule them. The simple act of dropping off extra tomatoes or a book to share. We weren't entangled, but we were interwoven. When the grandchildren visited, they quickly folded Marcus into their routine. "Is Mr. Marcus your boyfriend?" The question caught me off guard. I hesitated. "He's a very special friend." She frowned, considering. "Like how Jake is Noah's special friend for sleepovers?" I laughed lightly, wondering how Tom and Becky might react to such a comparison. Something like that. She dipped her brush into soft pink paint, nodding firmly. "I think it's nice. You smile more when he's around." Out of the mouths of babes. She was right. Marcus didn't define me, but he brought joy to my days. A quiet companionship that supported me rather than diminished me. Late August brought another shift. Helen invited me to lunch with our group of retired teachers, women who had known me at my most confident, my most assured. I walked into the restaurant bracing for questions, expecting them to notice the changes I had undergone. Grace Peterson greeted me with a delighted exclamation. "Eleanor, retirement agrees with you. You look marvellous." If only she knew. If only she understood what it had taken to reach this version of myself. Over lunch, I described Lakeshore Village, my new home, my activities. For the first time, I realised I spoke freely, without hesitation, without the quiet worry that I was failing at life. Helen leaned in conspiratorially. "And is there a special someone in the picture?" I shot her a mock glare, but I wasn't truly annoyed. I inhaled, then exhaled. "His name is Marcus. He owns the bookstore near the library. We reconnected a few months ago, and he recently moved into Lakeshore Village." The table erupted in delighted exclamations, their enthusiasm so genuine, so free of judgment. Jeanne lifted her glass in a toast. "Good for you. Life's too short to worry about what others think." She was right. She had always been right. Then Helen turned the conversation, shifting to Tom and Becky. "How are things with them? Last I heard, they weren't thrilled about your move." I sighed, rolling my fingers over my napkin. "We're working on it." For the first time in my life, I knew I had a choice, and that choice would be entirely mine. The request came hesitantly, weighted with an uncertainty that hadn't existed 6 months ago. Tom wasn't assuming anymore. He was asking, and that, in itself, was a remarkable shift. "Mom, I hate to ask this." The strain in his voice was evident, and for the first time I heard something new in it, not just stress, but recognition of my time, my choices, my life. He explained Becky's mother's accident, the sudden upheaval in their household, the scheduling conflicts that left him scrambling for solutions. Then, finally, carefully, he asked, "Would you be able to take the kids for a few extra days? Maybe overnight?" 6 months ago, this would have been a demand, not a request. 6 months ago, I would have agreed immediately, rearranging my life to accommodate everyone else's needs before my own. 6 months ago, I was living in their basement. But now, I paused, I thought. I considered, not just their needs, but mine. "I can help," I said finally, "but let's be specific about the schedule. I have commitments I need to keep as well." The relief in Tom's voice was palpable. "Thank you, Mum. Anything you can do would be a huge help." We worked out an arrangement. 3 nights, after-school activities covered on certain days, homework prepped and ready, and most importantly, the children would be in my space, on my terms. That evening, over dinner, I shared the plan with Marcus. He studied me carefully, thoughtful as always. "Are you sure about this? 3 overnight stays is different from afternoon visits." I nodded. "It's a genuine emergency, not a return to old patterns." Tom was clear and respectful of my time. That's progress. Marcus leaned back, considering. "And they'll be here, in your home." I smiled at his understanding. "Exactly. Not me going back to that house." The distinction mattered, and for the first time it felt like a decision that worked for everyone, including me. The children arrived in a flurry of excitement, backpacks slung over their shoulders, overnight bags dragging behind them. Noah's eyes darted around the condo, curious but reserved. Lily, as expected, bounced on her toes, already bursting with questions. "Grandma, where do we sleep?" I led them down the short hallway, pushing open the door to the guest room. Inside, I had arranged small, familiar comforts. Noah's soccer team pennant pinned to the wall, Lily's stuffed unicorn placed carefully on her pillow. Her eyes widened in surprise. "You remembered, mister. Sparkles!" She clutched the unicorn to her chest, blinking up at me. I softened. "Of course, he's been waiting for you." The first night fell into a quiet rhythm, settling into something that felt natural. Homework at the dining table. Dinner prepared together. Board games before bed. Not so different from how our visits had gone before, but something about the environment changed everything. Here, surrounded by evidence of my independence, it felt less like caretaking and more like sharing. They were guests in my life, not just extensions of their parents' world. By the second night, Noah made an unexpected request. "Can we help in your garden tomorrow?" I glanced up from stirring the pot on the stove. "You want to help?" He shrugged. "Dad says you grow the best tomatoes ever." Something inside me warmed at that. Tom had told them about my garden, about something I'd built on my own, apart from him, apart from his life. That mattered. Lily clapped her hands. "Yes, and can Mr. Marcus come over? He told me he's never tried real salsa before." Her request was casual, effortless, as if Marcus had always been part of our lives, as naturally folded in as family. Their complete acceptance of him was one of the greatest surprises of this new chapter. I smiled. I'm sure he'd love to join us. Later that evening, after tucking the children into bed and answering Lily's inevitable one more story request, I stepped onto my balcony. The lights from Lakeshore Village twinkled across the lake, the world quiet, still. From across the courtyard, Marcus's lamp glowed warmly in his living room, a comforting presence even from afar. Then my phone buzzed, a text from him. "How's it going with the grandkids? Need reinforcements?" I smiled, tapping out my reply. "All quiet on the Western Front." The last night of Noah and Lily's stay, something changed. It wasn't dramatic, not a single event that forced clarity, but rather the quiet unfolding of everything I'd been working toward, dot after dinner. As we sat on the balcony, the children nestled beneath soft blankets, Marcus sipping his tea beside me. I felt a strange sensation, contentment, not forced happiness, not quiet acceptance, but real, undeniable peace. Lily leaned her head against my arm. "I like it here, Grandma," I smiled, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I like it here too, sweetheart." Noah glanced up. "Will we still come here after this, after Dad gets everything sorted?" I reached for my mug, holding it tightly. "As often as you'd like." Their relief was visible, their ease settling deeper into their shoulders. Even Tom, even he had begun to understand. The next morning, as I dropped them off, Tom met me at the front steps of their house. Gone was the frustration, the bitterness, the quiet edge to his voice. Instead, he simply looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "Thank you, Mum. Not just for this, for everything." It wasn't an apology, it was better. It was acknowledgement. I squeezed his hand briefly. "You're welcome, Tom." No bitterness, no regret, just truth. And that was how it ended. Not with fireworks, not with screaming matches, not with final ultimatums, just with understanding, with acceptance, with the quiet realization that the woman they had once pushed aside was someone they could no longer ignore. I walked back to my car, back to my home, back to my life, one I had built, one that no longer felt like an escape, but a beginning. Marcus was already waiting at Lakeshore Village when I arrived. "How did it go?" he asked. I smiled. It went the way it was meant to.